Have you ever noticed how a single, tiny action may completely upend someone's world? Yes, that is you. You entered without ever noticing it, as they were busy pulling strings in the dark, whispering plans, and stacking lies like a house of cards. Suddenly, everything they had built began to tremble. People adore control, you see. They enjoy believing they have already scripted your ending and are 10 steps ahead. They secretly plan your demise while grinning at you. Believe me, we won't notice. However, they were unprepared for your refusal to fulfill your role. You wiped the entire game, but you didn't violate their rules. They are now perplexed, anxious, and observing you more intently, because you did more than just defend yourself when you stopped being predictable, stood your position, and refused to compromise. Everything they believed to be theirs was upset by you. It's funny how people with hidden objectives manage to live in the shadows because no one is actually looking, not because they are strong. They rely on your regularity, your trust, and your diversion. They rely on you going through life half asleep, believing rather than questioning, responding rather than observing, and why you're preoccupied with living your life. They're discreetly charting it, analyzing your habits, and figuring out when you're weak, hesitant, or self-conscious. They see you as controllable, predictable, and managed. They base their self-confidence on that delusion. However, awareness is like turning on a light in a secret-filled chamber. All of those tiny murmurs, odd coincidences, and unusual emotions you used to disregard suddenly begin to resonate. You start to pick up on the motivations behind the acts, the tone of the comments, and the way some people behave when they believe no one is watching. At first, it feels uncomfortable, as if you're entering another realm where things aren't as harmless as they seem. And that's precisely why the majority of people steer clear of it, because it's impossible to unsee after you've seen it. You become difficult to control as soon as you become conscious. You cease responding as they anticipate. Everything is thrown off when you halt, ask questions, and notice a small change in your energy. The same tricks don't always land the same way. The weight of the same words varies. You seem to have deviated from the screenplay that was written for you. They are now frantically attempting to determine why their lines are no longer functioning. Naturally, they will put you to the test. Put in a bit more effort. Try various perspectives. Perhaps even widen your smile a little. Be a little more polite in the hopes of returning to the security of ignorance. However, awareness is not that way. It persists once it's there. It gets sharper. Changes. You begin to notice patterns in many people, not just one. You become aware of how frequently deceit wears the appearance of friendship, how control masquerades as compassion, and how manipulation hides behind civility. The most intriguing aspect is that you don't even need to speak. You don't have to confront or expose them. Everything can be disrupted just by your awareness, because everything they do now feels riskier and heavier. They can tell that you're not as blind as you once were, that you're observing, calculating, and comprehending, and they are consumed by that uncertainty. When they used to behave boldly, it causes them to doubt their own goals and hesitate. It's not chaos that makes you unpredictable, but consciousness. You decide when to answer, when to remain silent, when to participate, and when to leave. And that scares someone who needs control. They no longer have the same ability to read you. If you know where your buttons are, they can't push them. It's similar to attempting to play a game in which the other person unexpectedly discovers every rule you were concealing. They never wanted you to learn about that power. Just awareness, not power or hostility. Silent, patient, perceptive knowledge that silently destroys their entire plan. What actually derails their goals, not retaliating, not disputing, nor you see, you have to get on their board for the whole process to function. All of their words, small jabs, and well-planned scenarios or bait meant to draw you in, elicit a response, and force you to clear throat, defend, clarify, and justify. Because as soon as you do, you enter their universe, their game, their timing, and their regulations. You would be surprised to learn how long they have been playing it. Yes, they anticipate opposition. They even to be pleasure in it. They have something to work with when there's conflict. It gives them power over the course and feeds their story. Clears throat. They have the ability to manipulate your words, change your feelings, and make you appear unstable while they remain composed and seem almost innocent. They have that stage. They excel in the situation. However, it has an odd effect on them when you don't play and instead just stand there and observe without moving. They are confused by it because there is no longer a script, no reaction to anticipate, no emotion to control, and no point of entry. It's similar like repeatedly striking nothing but air with a punch. They eventually lose their balance because they can't find anything firm to push against, not because you shove them. Refusing to participate is not a sign of weakness. It's control in its purest form, oh no. It's being fully aware of what's going on and opting out of the mayhem they caused. It is staring at the trap and moving silently around it. There is no need to prove anything, no drama, and no announcement. And that calm detachment and stillness speak louder than any argument you could have made. They begin observing you in a different way as they attempt to understand you. Why did you not respond? Why did you not become enraged? Why didn't you stand up for yourself like you used to? You have no idea how much that annoys them, since they are now the ones looking for a response. They are the ones making behavioral adjustments, experimenting with different strategies, and pushing a bit harder each time in the hopes that something may succeed. However, it doesn't, as you've already seen the game for what it is. You're not ignoring them because you're afraid. You're not keeping quiet because you're not sure. You're deciding not to provide them access, and that decision gradually deprives them of their authority. No influence, no audience, and no control. They were alone with their own cacophony. And their reality is more unstable the longer you maintain that stance. They may become more vocal, desperate, and noticeable. They may even attempt to entice others, exert pressure, or fabricate circumstances that compel you to react. But even in the midst of all that mayhem, you remain just outside of it, watching, untouchable. Because the instant you decide not to play, you render the game useless rather than merely avoiding it. They adore patterns. Yes, they are necessary. Their best tool is predictability. They analyze everything like a screenplay they can commit to memory, including your reactions, speech patterns, triggers, and hesitant times. Because they won't need to resist you once they understand your routine. All they have to do is hit the appropriate buttons and see you perform. It is effective and, in a twisted sense, somewhat elegant. You become angry here and remain silent there. At this moment, you defend yourself. At that point, you leave. The same rhythm, repeatedly. Additionally, they are mapping every move you make, transforming your personality into something they can control and predict, while you believe you are simply being yourself. They see you as a sequence rather than a person. You no longer respond in the same manner. Not drastically, not all at once, just sufficiently different to cause confusion. There's quiet when they expected rage. There's a question where they anticipated silence. You stop where they anticipated you to chase. Abruptly, the flawless little map they created begins to crumble. Chaos is not the same as unpredictability. That's what people don't comprehend. It has nothing to do with being careless or erratic. It's about being cautious enough to make a different decision, particularly when they believe they already know what you will do. It's a subtle change that subdues their expectations and drives them crazy. It's controlled disruption, because everything they do now feels risky. They can't rely on past behavior anymore. They can't anticipate your next step with confidence. It's like trying to solve a puzzle that keeps changing its shape every time you get close. Frustrating, exhausting, unsettling. Naturally, they'll try to make adjustments, try new reactions, try various approaches, and retest previous triggers to see whether they still function. You may also experience it occasionally, that need to revert to the old habit, the familiar reaction, the predictable self, because patterns, even dangerous ones, are cozy. The moment you resist that pull, the moment you choose a different reaction, even if it feels unnatural, you take back a piece of control they didn't want to lose. They're the ones responding now. They're the ones who are uncertain now. They are now the ones who are uncertain now. They are now the ones making an unsuccessful attempt to read you. And your unpredictability gets more accurate the more you embrace that understanding. It's not arbitrary, it's deliberate. You answer when it counts, remain silent when it helps you, leave when they expect you to stay, and remain when they expect you to leave. Every decision is once more yours, not a reflex they may take advantage of. The balance changes at that point. They can control someone who is predictable, but they can no longer control someone who thinks, observes, and makes decisions in a different way every time. And you start to notice cracks when someone who depends on control loses it. Initially, there was a trace of confusion beneath their confidence, a small haste in their motions, and a tinge of impatience in their tone. The mask no longer fits as well as it once did, all because you ceased to be the version of yourself that they had discovered. The way people respond after you stop bending is almost comical. Not loudly, not violently, but firmly and gently. You maintain your position. Just a firm and unwavering decision without any justifications, overanalyzing, or feverish need to be understood. And all of a sudden, just that seems dangerous, because they were never ready for unbreakable resistance. You see, most people are accustomed to operating under pressure. You'll adjust if you push a little. You'll fold if you push more. They rely on that gradual deterioration, the point at which you begin to question your position, doubt yourself, and consider whether it might be simpler to give in. They succeed there, not by strength, but by perseverance. However, when you remain steadfast, don't change, don't respond as they anticipate, and don't give in to pressure, it creates an uncomfortable situation for them. Uncertainty. They begin to ask themselves questions they have never had to. Why is this not functioning? Why do you not move? Why do you not react in the same manner? Additionally, it becomes increasingly clear that something is different the more they press, that you are no longer cooperating, that their customary techniques and control aren't working, and that's when the fear begins to seep in. Not overt panic, not loud terror. No, it's not overt. It conceals itself under annoyance, sarcasm, and fake assurance. However, it exists, because control is only predictable situations, whereof the precise pressure required to elicit a response, when they are aware of your boundaries, and that was just taken away by you. Being steadfast does not imply that you are unchangeable in every situation. It means you've chosen what matters and you refuse to compromise on it. For those who depend on confusion, that kind of clarity poses a threat, because anything that has already been defined cannot be twisted. They are unable to control a border that has been discreetly and plainly established. Of course, they might attempt to test it, go a bit farther, conceal their motivations, and approach you from a new direction, in an attempt to change the narrative and make you wonder if your position is excessive, harsh, or inflexible. They might even pretend to be the ones who are currently being victimized. However, you remain still, and that silence, that silent resistance to change, makes them face something they weren't prepared for, that their influence is not what they believed it to be, that all of those small strategies, subtle pressures, and well-timed actions are no longer effective on you. And it unnerves people when they lose that type of control, even in part, clears throat, because they are now in an environment that is difficult for them to navigate. Your assurance. You don't make much noise about it. You're not attempting to make a point. Simply said, you are reliable. And for someone who enjoys breaking rules, consistency is unsettling, because there isn't a vulnerability, an opening, or a moment of uncertainty for them to take advantage of. It's similar like striking a wall that remains still and unresponsive, and that affects them in some way over time. It erodes their self-assurance, presumptions, and sense of control. They begin to question their strategy, stopping in situations where they used to act carelessly and paying closer attention to you in an attempt to figure out what changed. All because you once made the decision to give up on everyone who thought you would give up. Growth has an odd byproduct. People find it uncomfortable. However, it's not the kind of discomfort they publicly acknowledge. No, this one is concealed by smiles, informal talks, and small behavioral changes that aren't immediately apparent. Because when you begin to truly change, you not only make your life better, but you also upend the version of yourself that they felt comfortable controlling. You see, around you, people develop subdued expectations. They determine your identity, what you will put up with, and how far they can push you. And they unwind after that picture is established. They move confidently around you, knowing exactly what to anticipate and how to behave to get their desired result. For them, it's safe and predictable. Growth, however, does not require consent. It is unconcerned about the image they produced. It disregards the boundaries they set for you. It simply grows, initially silently. A fresh perspective, a more robust sense of self, and a more acute understanding of what you deserve and don't. Additionally, you're no longer reacting in the same manner before anyone notices. Things no longer slide as they once did. Things you used to put up with begin to feel strange. The tension starts at that point, because you no longer fit the position that was given to you. You're moving beyond it, and that compels them to change or fight back. Additionally, they frequently resist. They don't want you to fail, at least not in a way they would acknowledge, but rather because your development makes them uncomfortable. It draws attention to their inertia. It mirrors the aspects of themselves that they have disregarded. It's simpler to question you, minimize your development, make subtle remarks, and see whether you'll revert to your previous habits rather than confronting that. Perhaps they make jokes about it. They might put you to the test. Perhaps they give the impression that you have changed negatively, not because you have, but rather because they don't benefit from the new version of you as much as they did from the previous one, and that seems like losing control. You can tell by the way they engage with you, a bit more watchful, a bit more cautious. They are attempting to determine what still functions and what does not, as well as where the new borders are. Because the things that once ensured a response no longer have the same effect. You're harder to read, harder to manipulate, and harder to revert to past behaviors, and distance is created by that uncertainty, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, because people either adjust or grow uncomfortable when they are unable to control the consequences of their behavior around you. Additionally, discomfort frequently manifests as silent resistance that is disguised as worry or criticism. This is the part people don't anticipate, though. You're not developing to confront them. You're developing because you can now clearly see who you are. And once you recognize your value, your boundaries, and your path, you won't be able to regress in order to appease someone else, even if it doesn't appeal to them, even if a dynamic is altered, even if it means letting go of some things. Growth doesn't make noise. It doesn't require confirmation. Regardless of whether anyone is prepared or not, it simply continues going.